have this machine, and probably many different types of this machine. Now think about what you need for this machine to work. It has to do three things. It has to cut, it has to splice through, and then it has to put things back together again. So if it doesn't do all three, it's going to do more harm than good. So all three things have to be working together. Otherwise, this machine is going to be worse than having none at all. Another thing is that DNA actually has the instructions to build these enzymes, the topoisomerase enzymes, but it can't be decoded unless you have these enzymes already present. And it can't be copied unless you have these enzymes present. That's something I didn't show you in the previous video, that these things had to have been working while the DNA was being copied and gone through that whirring helicase. It had to have these things going to make sure it didn't get tangled up in the process. You had to have all these things working, otherwise living things couldn't work. And in fact, the antibiotic called the fluoroquinolone class of antibiotic, or levaquin and Cipro, these actually work by stopping the third step of putting things back together. That's how they work, how they kill the germs. You have these enzymes going through, snipping the DNA to ribbons, but then it doesn't get put back again. So the bacterium dies. That's how this antibiotic works. Now, let's go back to DNA. Now, I did tell you that DNA has some pretty interesting design features that make it more stable, but it's still quite an unstable molecule. This was a surprise to people. Here is one scientist on this. There's a general belief that DNA is rock solid. Actually, DNA is highly reactive. On a good day, about 1 million bases of the DNA of a human cell are damaged. Now, why aren't we a mutated mess then? Well, this was something that was quite a puzzle to scientists. And the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2015 was awarded for discovering the problem and how living things solve it. These three share the Nobel Prize. And this comes from the Nobel Prize website itself. In the early 70s, scientists believed that DNA was an extremely stable molecule, but Thomas Lindahl demonstrated that DNA decays at a rate that ought to have made the development of life on Earth impossible. So he realized DNA, you can measure how fast it breaks down. Living things shouldn't survive. So he realized that there must be some repair machines that all living creatures must have to undo this damage to DNA that he found out did happen. And the other two scientists found other ways that we cells repair the damage to DNA that happens just in ordinary chemistry. In fact, one biochemist, James Shapiro, said that all cells from bacteria to man possess a truly astonishing array of repair systems. So without these repair systems, life couldn't work. But once again, DNA has the instructions to build its own repair machines. But you couldn't preserve those instructions unless you already had repair machines working. So again, living things had to have an enormous number of different machines. Otherwise, life couldn't start in the first place. And this has implications for the age of things too, because dinosaurs have had DNA discovered. I mean, Dr. Mary Schweitzer has written 2 papers where she's talked about DNA having been discovered with a pretty standard biochemical test. There's this probe molecule here called DAPI. And DAPI actually lodges in the double helix of a DNA and makes a fluorescent signal. I'll show you what sort of things it looks like. See the fluorescent signal here? It's saying here's DNA has been discovered. This is a standard thing. A biochemist sees this, he knows there's DNA. So this has been found in dinosaur bones. And the dinosaurs, the T-Rex is meant to be 68 million years old, and yet it has DNA. Now here are some figures about how fast DNA breaks down. Now, see, even if it was frozen at -5 Celsius or 23 Fahrenheit, it would actually break down completely in 6.8 million years. And that's to individual letters. There's no double helix anymore. It's just individual letters. Now, this is 1/10 of the presumed age of the dinosaur bone, which has DNA still with a double helix of probably about at least 12 units long. Otherwise, that test wouldn't work. And now, they also believe dinosaurs lived in warm climates. Now, as you can see, as you warm it up, the decay rate goes up enormously, exponentially, as you increase the temperature. So even a fairly mild temperature, like 25 Celsius, 77 Fahrenheit, it should all be gone in 22,000 years. So this is consistent with the view that dinosaur fossils we had were buried during Noah's flood about 4,500 years ago. That's why we still have some DNA, even though it's broken apart. We still see it with that test. But if it was millions of years, we shouldn't have any dinosaur DNA left. So this is a very good example of how this shows the dinosaurs cannot be as old as people claim they are. Now, let's look at a few other things here. I mentioned things like how DNA is the information storage system. So the mycoplasma, as I mentioned, has 600 kilobytes. Now, we humans have about 3 gigabytes worth of information. So if evolution were true, it means that things like a mycoplasma must have evolved into humans, which have 5,000 times as much information as the mycoplasma. And if you like to think about what that means, it's about 1,000 Bible-sized books of information. Mind you, it's only 200 times the size of the IRS tax code. But the thing is, the information in books is written with ink on a page, but the information didn't come from the ink. This is not possible. And again, from our Evolution's Achilles heel DVD, the information doesn't come from the ink. It comes from the author who arranged the ink molecules into letters and words and sentences and paragraphs. And in the same way, there's nothing in the chemistry of a DNA to make it write the messages of life. Again, just as the information in the book doesn't come from the ink chemistry, the information in life doesn't come from a DNA chemistry. It's written with DNA letters, just as a book is written with ink letters, but the information is outside that. And information you could call a third fundamental quantity. It's not matter and it's not energy, and I can prove this very easily. I mean, think about this thought experiment. I want to save weight for the next time I travel on an airplane, so I should wipe my hard drive. That's silly, isn't it? Because wiping my hard drive doesn't make any difference to the weight of it. Even though my hard drive might be full of a terabyte or 2 of information, I wipe it to 0, it doesn't change the weight. So therefore, information isn't matter or energy. It's something outside of that and riding on it, but doesn't come from matter or energy. Now, think again about the book. And you see, a book requires a language too. You see, my books aren't going to be meaningful to you unless you understand the English language. You see, what if I gave you a gift? You're fairly happy if I give you a gift because it means something you get for free. Now, any German listeners I promise a gift to may not be so happy because gift in German means poison. This is the warning for the cyanide tablets used to wipe out 6 million Jews in the Nazi extermination camps. They had a warning, gift gas, meaning poison gas. Okay, so gift in German means poison. And I had this confirmed when I was giving creation talks in New Zealand where my parents still live. And a German came up to me and said that I was right about the meaning of gift in German. And he said when he first came to New Zealand, he was appalled by our Christmas custom because we try to poison our families. So you see, we have to have the right language, otherwise we get the wrong message. Now, when it comes to DNA, though, now, DNA actually has multiple languages on the same set of DNA. See, I mean, a book's quite amazing. You know there's at least a human intellect behind a book to write in English. I mean, no apes have anything like human language, okay? But DNA has multiple languages. So it's more like a book you can read in English and read it in German, you get another message. Read it backwards, you get still another message. You read every 10th letter, you still get another message. Everything makes sense. So multiple languages on DNA point to a superhuman intelligence far in advance of our own to put multiple languages on the same part of the DNA. And this is where the so-called junk DNA comes in. It's not junk at all. The concept of junk DNA belongs in the junk pile because we know that it's actually doing something. It's being read. And this is the other languages that people had not realized until fairly recently. Now, I'm going to show you one of the languages that gets read. That's the language to make the proteins. And I'll show you what happens. This is, again, another video that we have produced here.
This animation demonstrates how the digital information encoded within DNA is used to direct protein synthesis. This is a DNA double helix containing the digital code which directs the cell in all aspects of operation. And here we see a protein complex called an RNA polymerase traveling down the DNA strand. As it moves down the strand, it carefully unwinds the DNA, preparing it for transcription. Inside the polymerase, we see a single-stranded copy of the original instructions being assembled as individual bases are positioned and added to the growing strand. A stop code marks the end of the protein specification, at which point this copy, known as a messenger RNA transcript, exits the polymerase and heads towards a two-part chemical manufacturing machine called the ribosome. While the messenger RNA moves towards the ribosome, transfer RNA molecules attach to specific amino acids in preparation for assembly. As the messenger RNA transcript passes through the ribosome, the process of translation begins. Using the instructions encoded on the messenger RNA as a template, the transfer RNA molecules align specific sequences of bases to corresponding amino acids, creating a protein chain. As this chain exits the ribosome, it is met by chaperones which prevent premature folding, while escorting the protein to a barrel-shaped machine called a chaperonin. This machine helps fold the protein into the precise shape required to perform its function. Although it is unclear how the chaperonin achieves this, we do know that accurate folding is essential in order for the protein to accomplish its intended function. Once the protein is complete, it is released into the cytoplasm to do its job.
So yet more machines are needed to read the information in the DNA and make the proteins that build what we are. So again, we get this vicious circle, as I've mentioned with a few of the other machines, that DNA can't be read without its decoding machines. But the decoding machines can't be built without the instructions to build them on the DNA, which can't be read unless you have decoding machines to read them. But where the decoding machines come from without the instructions to build them. So you've got this, everything has to be working perfectly together right from the start. And the DNA decoding machines are mostly powered with ATP, which is made by the motors. Now, how do you get the motors? You need the instructions in the DNA read by decoding machines, which use ATP made by the motors. So what do you call a three-way chicken and egg problem? I mean, maybe egg, nymph, grasshopper, some insects have a three-stage metamorphosis, and maybe that's what you got there. But you see what I mean about how everything has to be working together, even to produce the simplest living creature. Now, this is actually interesting. See what I mean about the information being so essential to understand. And this is a death knell for evolution. I'll give you one evolutionist who admitted the problem. He asked, how did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software? And he answers, nobody knows. You see, the origin of information is a crucial problem that evolutionists have to explain just by matter and time plus chance. Well, let's see if Richard Dawkins, the world's leading evolutionist, has a clue.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
You see, even the world's leading evolutionists couldn't answer the question about where information could come from just matter and time and energy. But have I forgotten something here, like natural selection? Well, actually, no, I haven't. And I'll show you why. See, natural selection they can call differential reproduction. See, it's not so much survival of the fittest, it's reproduction of the fittest. See, natural selection says this thing is fitter than this thing, therefore this leaves more offspring. So what you have to have before you have natural selection, you have to have reproduction. And therefore, natural selection can't explain the origin of the first self-reproducing cell. And here's a very famous evolutionist from the 20th century, Dobzhansky. He's very clear about this. Natural selection is differential reproduction. In order to have natural selection, you have to have self-reproduction or self-replication and at least two distinct self-replicating units or entities. Pre-biological natural selection is a contradiction in terms. So we cannot use natural selection to explain the first reproducing cell. So this is a huge problem for evolution because Darwinian evolution can't even get off the ground. I mean, I'm not accepting Darwinian evolution anyway, but it can't even get started. And if it couldn't get started, it couldn't have occurred. Simple as that. And here is what I'm showing you has been an incredibly good witnessing tool. I'll show you, like the leading atheistic philosopher from last century was Antony Flew from Oxford University, where Dawkins comes from. Now, a few years before he died, he was still lucid, but he actually abandoned atheism and believed in a creator God. And one of the things that led him to this belief was the incredible complexity of living things. And he says here that Dawkins overlooks the fact that Darwin pointed out that his whole argument began with a being which already possessed reproductive powers. And this is the creature, the evolution of which a truly comprehensive theory of evolution must give some account. Darwin was well aware he'd not produced such an account. And here is a conclusion. Now, the findings of more than 50 years of DNA research have provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design. Now, the only word of warning I'd have here is that design is not enough. It's incredibly powerful, but it's not enough because he never became a Christian, unfortunately. Okay, but at least it can lead people away from atheism, but I think we've got to go to the next step and actually show that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and how he proved his credentials by rising from the dead. And that's an important part, but that's after we show them there is truly a God, and we show that Jesus is creator, redeemer, savior. So thanks very much for listening to this, and I hope the questions have been all answered on the right side. Just a few things, just to say why we do what we do. Now, Dawkins is actually a very useful person to quote because he said Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. You see, he and other atheists need evolution as a crutch for their faith. So what are we supposed to do about it? We're supposed to demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So we are unashamedly a Christian ministry, not an intelligent design ministry or just an evolution bashing ministry. Well, we want to point people to Jesus Christ as the creator and redeemer. And in fact, we're supposed to be prepared to make a defense or give an answer to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. And Jesus himself said the greatest commandment was loving the Lord your God with your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind. There's nothing in the Bible about checking your brains in at the church door. We're supposed to engage our brains and nourish them on God's word, the Bible. And one way to do that is our Creation magazine, which I hope all of you have subscribed to, but also you can get a gift for people. But you see, here is why it's a great witnessing tool. This man came from a Christian home, but he went away from his faith. But then some faithful people actually witnessed to him, and part of it was giving him the Creation magazine, which showed evolution doesn't have a leg to stand on. The creation makes perfect scientific and logical sense. But if there's a creation, there must be a creator, and therefore he owns me. And how can I become right with him? And that's why every magazine presents the gospel. And here's a good example of what a great magazine for a family it is. Like this lady said that it encourages her own faith, but also she can teach her children the truth of creation, which the government schools aren't going to do, and to witness her unbelieving friends. And let's face it, it's not a question of should we witness to our children, but who is doing the witnessing. Make no mistake, people are witnessing to your kids, and most of it is very anti-Christian witnessing from all these glossy magazines and the media and Hollywood. So we should provide the right sort of witnessing. And here you can actually subscribe. Again, there's a shortcut here, creation.com/mag is the shortcut. And we can also get the digital subscription, which means you can give it to family and friends in different parts of the world. And what a great magazine is to pick up. And here's a classic example, an article in it, how do dating methods work? And this is not about how boys meet girls. This is about how old things are and how we can know. And when it comes to design, my own favorite topic, well, we have articles on design all the time. And one of the most interesting topics is how humans are learning to copy from the designs in nature. What we see in nature has given people ideas they never would have thought of otherwise. And people think that these engineers are so brilliant, but they're only making the copies. What about the one who made the originals? And some other books you might like. Here, there's a book here. I mentioned how design is not enough. Well, here's the next step: Christianity for skeptics. Why do we believe Jesus is the Christianity the true religion? By the Bible's the word of God. How Jesus rose from the dead. How do we answer other religions like atheism, Islam, Hinduism? And as mentioned before, some of the clips I had are from this video here, which has a free study guide going with it. And remember, creation.com/store, you can find all sorts of things there. And also, here's an example of a book about how humans are copying from God's designs here. This is Dr. Stuart Burgess, who's won awards for the way he's copied nature, but he actually gives credit to the creator, the original. And also, just to mention some things here, here are some ways you can keep track of us online, especially while we're all locked down with the pandemic. All these different things, you can find out more at creation.com/creation-talk. It's got a whole lot of our podcasts and webinars and Creation Magazine Live, and you can find it on whatever your favorite platform is.